You know what you could do? Try the dark internet. People do all kinds of creepy stuff on there. My friend met someone on the dark web. They made her stepdad disappear.
I don't know about that, Hector. I mean, that seems a little bit extreme. Ah, damn it!
Wow, I really underestimated this show. Is probably a thought I should only have once, but alas, and believe me, it's only because Crazy Ex-Girlfriend is a TV show, and generally my expectations for a TV show are at least, this will be a TV show. And with dribbly phrases like golden era and peak TV, ubiquitous in television criticism, we know shows have experimented and pushed past old expectations for the medium. But this is different. The 4th episode of the new season, Josh's Ex-Girlfriend is Crazy, certainly in the early weeks felt like the season's best representative. It was an emotional roller coaster, it struck a perfect balance with altogether too many genres, including horror this time, and moved with a relentless pace. But on top of all of that, while I was watching Rebecca stalk Josh outside his parents' house, I had this thought that this is exactly the show we would have imagined if Crazy Ex-Girlfriend had been cancelled after 2 seasons. In fact, this is the show we're always imagining when cancellations cut stories short. In my ever-expanding understanding that I am never fully prepared to comprehend this show, it stands out immediately when we don't by default expect television shows to pay off. But that's so much of Season 3, payoff. And to further my underestimation, 304 happens 4 episodes in. Though it is a payoff, it is not the payoff. Deeper things are always at work. For example, this scene here. It's the 12th episode. Rebecca, Paula, Heather, and Valencia are just sitting at Sugarface, shooting the breeze, and then their discussion shifts to plot advancement. That's all. But there's significance to this mundanity, even that it is mundane. I felt it that this right here is a sitcom, in such a traditional sense that Heather even brings up the Bechdel test. This conversation has happened before, and it's happened before here, which is why it struck me so much. The Girl Squad has been meeting regularly, especially in the back half of the season, undisrupted by the major life events that so rocked them early on. Nothing to test the integrity of their friendship or as being alive, so they exist, and they live. And so what's taken for granted on other shows was wrought by achievement here. We can take a breath now, and enjoy those moments in between. Let's not forget that this has also been teased at least twice over, in a sense. Valencia's first appearance in Season 2 is her encounter with Rebecca and Heather at this same donut shop, which is where Rebecca reveals her plan to Heather about Valencia. And after the Girl Squad is created with the addition of Valencia, we see right away that it's still incomplete. Up from 2, but we still have only 3 or 4 at that table. Funny though, because we weren't thinking about the Girl Squad being incomplete in that moment, because that moment was so firmly nestled in the context of its arc. Rebecca was incomplete without Paula. Maybe we didn't even entertain the idea that Valencia and Heather too were incomplete without her, and vice versa. And isn't that the mistake we always make in our lives? But they've come together now, with an unlikely community rearranged from more traditional lines of conflict and divide. Each of them played a part, so for me the question that leads this recap is how did they do it?
Honestly, I thought that was a sponge, so, it's a good thing I don't do dishes, right?
You're literally the worst.
Okay, I'm sorry. All right, you don't want to graduate, so, just fail the class and you can stay.
How do I fail? I'm doing so well.
Kill the sponge, duh.
What?
In a season of such growth, Heather speaks to the theme of self-actualization not only most directly, as arguably Valencia had already done so previously, but also literally, as she would.
God, I really can't believe it. I got my life together in a really short amount of time. Like, making a human, cute boyfriend, great new job, and I'm like crushing it here.
Rebecca gives Heather some constructive feedback, and it resonates. So Heather decides to get her life on track, ducking out of the frame to do so. Cool Heather is a somewhat distant Heather, but we're nearing the end of that dance we do with perspective, culminating in a jump cut she initiates. Coinciding with Rage Becca's rampage, Heather hits an early character low point, told she has to soar like an eagle. Heather being a student is something that well illustrates one of the show's interesting habits, which is to introduce a significant character detail first as a running joke. Heather likes to say she's a student to get out of trouble, but what if there was more to it than that? It's not exactly a commentary on comedy, but it does flout the convention to simply let running jokes sit, so to speak. Because that's really the thing, is a running joke is self-evident or complete. But here we take it a step further. So less commentary, but that it more so facilitates that recurrent work of deconstructing stereotypes. So I guess the reason I even mentioned commentary is because a running joke is theoretically minimizing, as you can't dwell on it. That it's a shorthand for the shorthand of stereotypes, it makes them benign. If we were Heather's buddy, we might not think her student thing was an issue, even as it becomes one for her. Oh, Heather, she loves being a student, that's her thing. This is one way immovable problems come to be. Or should I say, if we were Heather's buddy and also paying attention. Rebecca is particularly bad here, at the moment trying to discredit Josh Chan, the lying liar man. You can't blame her for being stressed out, but Heather is the collateral damage on which the camera lingers. So what does she do? We get the sense she does some soul-searching on her own, and has to assert her priorities, as other characters do at various times. As a first step, there's organization, even, or especially, of the mind.
I can't really make any decisions about our relationship until I sort out who I am.
Heather, I just want to take our relationship to the next level.
Well, another challenge is that you live here with your mom, who's your best friend, so there's also that.
Can't hurt she's become a natural at home base as well. From behind the bar, she can maintain her observing eye, but this stands in contrast to what we've seen earlier. And let's talk about home base for a second. The 9th episode is so great for so many reasons, and not least of which for its world building. We have this scene where Nathaniel arrives at home base and gets as close to indulging in solid food as he had when first we met him exactly 1 season prior, and immediately recognizes White Josh across the bar. Now, apart from musical sequences, this is the first scene they've shared together. There's a moment where I think, wait, how? Before Nathaniel clarifies. Of course, he knows Daryl's now ex-boyfriend, and that becomes the basis of their subplot together. But they get to talking, and Heather appears. She offers commentary and a reminder of her watchful eye, and so you get this sense that this is like the watering hole, that when characters come here, they'll run into familiar faces. And expansion of familiarity across geography is how hatred is defeated, for example. It's a simple lesson. So what's important here is that in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, we see the process of the expansion, what it looks like, how characters react to it, and interact with each other. Consistent then with the theme of reconstruction is building up settings alongside characters, like home base, whose name is taking on more poetry as the series progresses. And granted, this all sounds really dumb because where else are you going to have characters appear but for settings? But the difference is this cross-pollination with history. That's the process. So much has changed in West Covina since Rebecca first arrived. Heather, White Josh, and Nathaniel never would have met if not for her. Nathaniel was assigned White Feather after Rebecca broke the water scandal, while neighbor Heather and friend of friend White Josh met on the party bus. It's about a strong sense of place, that a location has meaning, and endowing a backdrop with significance takes considerable setup. It's a world, and a world is populated. In any TV show, the main characters are going to encounter priests, or therapists, or grocers. They could just be that. But in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, the priest is Father Bra, the therapist is either Noel or David Akopian, grocers dust potatoes and do cartwheels, Kevin's smile hides a lot of repressed pain, the popular Casting Call magazine is represented, even the bartender has hopes and dreams. We also have a designated assistant if you need to berate or threaten some labor out of an arguably not altogether competent employee.
Okay, yeah, no, I don't think this is a good idea.
Shut up! I'm sorry, that was mean. Shut up.
It feels like a lived-in place, because there are neighbors. The various quiet establishment that Heather is attuned to her job smoothly bridges into Heather's next step career-wise.
It doesn't matter what race you are my equal.
Oh, okay. Kevin, did you have a point, or is this just for
Yes.
fun?
Very smooth. In a fun parallel, Heather becomes Kevin's boss at the same time Rebecca becomes Nathaniel's. So how does this happen? Kevin supplies Heather with a program targeting people of diverse backgrounds, which sounds roughly like affirmative action. This is an affirmative action story. Heather arrives at the corporate headquarters and sees something I imagine many in the professional world are familiar with. She doesn't really fit. It's kind of a culture clash, and Heather may say or do things because she doesn't feel tethered to a system that efficiently reproduces its crushing sameness and values silence as a function of bureaucratic complexity. Now, common wisdom in so many industries is that you have to be in the right place at the right time. Luck, widely held as the unsung virtue, key to career success. But luck is a currency, and with any, there's socioeconomic divide. To be in that right place, you have to be in that right place. And as I hope we all understand by now, everybody everywhere at all times is hired based on their gender and ethnicity, no matter what it is. It's an evil, but it doesn't necessarily make any one evil, because these biases are natural, and were up until recently beyond our understanding. That's why affirmative action is a temporary salve on a system wounded by these biases, and until that system is entirely operated on, well, let's just say it's hard to estimate the ability of minorities when they're outside the building. Heather manages to implement her great ideas because the time and the place worked out to receive them. And these great ideas, I think, come partly from the brimming ambition induced by existential questions about purpose. It's something even she has trouble fully understanding, that lightheadedness you get when you realize you're an adult now. She was in her moment, or she was her moment, and so too was home base. This is not an affirmative action story. even though I said it was. It's just that the calculus of curtailed advancement for minorities doesn't fall wholly to the system, cannot come from a deliberate take on the subject matter. This is where the text above the subtext matters in storytelling, and so an otherwise controversial idea can be teased out naturally, without invoking the terminology which riles preconception, not unfairly, in this case.
Yes, that's me. Dessert tapas.
And speaking of natural, Heather hooks up with Hector, and it just makes so much sense. They're both effortlessly cool people, whose coolness in fact usually overrides any frustration with their equally effortless immobility, and they're unfairly pigeonholed in sidekick roles, which makes them keen observers.
Why are all my friends in love with this girl?
And yet also often surprisingly oblivious.
So then I'm going front, back, and it's all dirty in the back, so when I move it to the front, then that gets all dirty. I'm just happy I have a spot at all, because I used to have to pay.
And what I really love about this relationship, other than the inherent fan service of pairing off two characters we've appreciated individually for 2.5 seasons, is that they exist with almost no drama. Even when Heather's pregnant, which is usually when TV characters go into harpy mode, they work through it. Again, Heather's this season was a story of self-actualization. And so where does this exploration of her inner self ultimately lead? Back outward.
I'll do it.
Wait, what did she just say?
Sorry. Hey, Heather?
She agrees to carry Daryl's baby, and this more so than anything between Daryl and White Josh was the payoff to a setup from the previous finale.
Oh shoot, we forgot to get him a present.
I am making him a present, bitch!
However, that does leave the Daryl and White Josh relationship as almost an afterthought. They break up, which puts additional stress on the why, that being the baby, and we don't get as much rationale from Daryl why he wants the baby as we've had rationales from other characters who have wanted things. We can reason that eventually there's gonna be an impassable schism in the relationship, and it will be interesting to see how our control group passes through it next season. That leaves their story here more as scaffolding for the big baby MacGuffin, which isn't nothing, but did strike a same curious note throughout. Of course, the breakup also allows us a further insight on White Josh's insecurities, and his befriending Nathaniel is worth its 0 body fat weight in gold. We get a reminder of his childhood demons and the intensity of discipline all that bullying inspired. And then Daryl's journey relies upon the help of others, all those relationships he spent last season grappling with. Mostly Paula, but by now we understand why he's someone you'd want to help. Like Rebecca, he's one of the unifying forces in West Covina, with roughly the same hit and miss rate. In fact, Rebecca puts it into words at one of her low moments.
You always make me feel better. The first second I came here, you've been so nice to me. I'd do anything for you. You know that, right?
It would be hard to believe that this is the end for the relationship in the penultimate season, but Crazy Ex-Girlfriend is, as we well know by now, a show that so often flicks your expectations on its cute little button nose. However, I think it's actually their breakup scene that rings hopeful for their future. They managed to split without verbalizing it, because they're just that in sync, and they've mutually and subconsciously understood it's the correct choice, at least for the moment. Even though it confuses White Josh on the mutual aspect of the breakup, this is what healthy communication looks like. It's so alien.
Did you get my email about the Madigan Estate Trust case?
I did. You spent the majority of the email laying out the details of your own relationship with someone named White.
You okay? Need me to wipe anything?
No, it was weird last time when you did that.
Yeah, I shouldn't have looked you right in the eyes. Copy that.
Paula's been spending a lot of this series living out her alternate family fantasy, in which she's unmarried and has an adult daughter. As Rebecca postulates, this may be evidence of an empty life, if there's a kernel of truth there. It's hardly a love kernel, but we do see that Paula is not the most attentive parent. It's not just about Tommy growing up to be exactly like Brandon, but that they and Scott have developed an understanding that Paula intermittently stops caring about them. Now we get that whenever Paula is with Rebecca and it's all fun, there are people she's leaving behind.
My life is chores and working and studying and never having enough time to finish the last season of Outlander.
I wasn't trying to start something. You do your best. But it always feels like there's some part of you that's not really here. Why is that? Dunno.
The answer to Scott's query here comes from Paula's mini Crazy Ex-Girlfriend adventure in Buffalo. She runs into her very first everything, Jeff Channington, and she's tempted down this road again. They share common interests, which can't be said for Paula and most people in her life, even Rebecca sometimes.
Oh, right, you love cars. I always forget that because it doesn't interest me.
If the show changes to the point it brushes up against retcon, like Mrs. Hernandez speaking, they can just chalk it up to Rebecca's characteristic insensitivity. That's goddamn clever. After a nice inversion of the heroic rescue, Paula reasons she's been neglecting Scott because she always wondered what her life would have been like with Jeff. Here we are back at this moment, which felt so different.
I would be proud to be your friend. Now that I know the truth, what you did for love, for true love, I wish that I had been as brave when I was your age.
As she says, this time she got to make the choice, where before she was dumped. Paula, arguably thanks to being alongside Rebecca on her wild journey, is clear-eyed about fantasy men. Jeff is imbued with more meaning than he could possibly contain, and going through with this would have been Outlander-style escapism, a temporary fix. I do want to take a moment to appreciate Scott, or at least the comedy stylings of his actor Steve Monroe, in the particular way he says words.
And the one she sold for $35 to a stranger who defiled it with his seed? She's so broken inside. Sleeping in the same bed.
Paula will likely make an effort to involve herself more at home, but conversely vows to stop interfering in the lives of yet other people after the fiasco with Daryl. But as Rebecca also discovers, it's not that easy. The problem for Paula is that people are affected by her interference and her absence, and also by a front-facing self she's unaware of. And so, like Heather, she has to look inward to then look back out, though she does so in conversation. With some help from Rebecca, she's made aware that she's the office bitch, which is apparently what Paula's show is called.
You have that mug that says office bitch.
It's ironic. Like the mug that says not a mug.
Again, there's been this implicit quality to what's suddenly become an issue, to where Rebecca thought Paula celebrated the title. And it certainly looks that way in retrospect. Here we have another case of shifting perspectives, though it's more like expanding perspectives. Paula being tough and self-confident is comparable to the situation way back in the 5th episode of the series, where those qualities came as part of a victory, of asserting herself over a very traditional office. Now this isn't to say that later Crazy Ex-Girlfriend makes earlier Crazy Ex-Girlfriend bad by deconstructing it, although even if it did, that would be equally fascinating. Because in 105, the conclusion drawn was that while a professional woman's righteous anger can be a whirlwind, it doesn't swallow her whole. And importantly, we sympathize with her position throughout. But now we have further and even conflicting sympathies. It's not just the direction of the scene, which lingers on the reaction shots of people affected by Paula's insults, but by this point we've accumulated enough history with these characters that we like them, and so care about what's derived by the lingering. 2 steps, and also writing and directing in concert.
And Jim, you are ripped.
It's just protein shakes.
Nice. They're working.
Paula resolves to do better and does so by directly responding to Sunil's complaint about her. As much as I love any instance of Sunil, I wish this resolution played just slightly differently. Sunil wants to be recognized for his work, but Paula can't or even refuses to do so. In the end, she recognizes his work is good, but did the work improve or was she missing things earlier? Neither really exists in evidence, so it's almost like she's just saying, good job. So I might have preferred that Paula had simply revised her mode of criticism rather than give Sunil the participant award, which I suppose needles classic conservative anxiety about the cheapening of the workplace. But instead I have to conclude it's that Paula was missing things earlier, and if we make the connecting leap that it's because of preconceptions, then I think it's okay. For Paula, nothing can measure up to her standards because they're so high even she can't.
I was a C student growing up. I always feel like I'm trying to prove myself, especially in my career, because it is so important to me. But that's my problem, and it's not your problem, and I'm sorry I was a jerk because I was.
As thematic extension of the lateral criticism of the complex thesis statement let's generalize about men, Paula building bridges this season takes a lot of labor in the form of hard introspection. Empowerment is not a power fantasy. Off this musical number, we might think that this season of Revenge Against Men would see Paula individuate herself from all the relationships Rebecca points out here. But it's not really like that. Instead, she reconciles her relationships, whether personal, romantic, or familial, and by doing so, we're asking, who is she, and who is she in the lives of other people? And the empowerment consistent with the subversion here is that the answer is these 2 questions are one and the same. The process by which Paula reconnects with Sunil and even Daryl is the same as with Scott. It begins with the self, and we see that these men are worth connecting with. They are her society. Society being, ideally, less you and them, and more a series of relationships, even a network. It's just a matter of there being parity with each, as Rebecca suggests should be the case between them.
But you're the little spoon and I'm the big spoon, and that's how it works. I mean, you said so yourself.
I shouldn't have said that. That's not what we should be. I mean, because you know what size spoons fit together the best?
No.
Same size spoons.
Aw. Hey.
We'll remember this, because it's the key to Paula's character, and for now, it's significant the key is missing.
I wanted a theme. Something like Riverdale.
Please, Janie.
None of your friends are hot enough to be on Riverdale.
So, are there gonna be glow sticks then?
Well, now you're just trying to provoke me.
As whereas Rebecca Bunch demonstrates, Josh leaving Rebecca at the altar had an effect on West Covina, this small town rocked by a scandal. For Valencia, her business was hurt. Unfairly, of course, but such is the game. Her name and face is attached to a disaster wedding, and that's all people see, surface details. She should be spending time course correcting, but still offers to help Rebecca get revenge on Josh. Arguably, it is revenge for her too, but her anger at Josh is more for the business thing, as she'd truly gotten over him around the time of his engagement to Rebecca. She shows up, because of course she does. Rebecca's her friend. And as Valencia says, she's never had a friend like Rebecca before. The 6th episode of the season might be my favorite. I liked it right away, but on the second viewing, the 1-2 punch of Nathaniel connecting to his mom and then Valencia breaking down was actually emotionally overwhelming. Valencia begins the episode by blurring the line between support and showmanship, and then makes that line crystal clear. Heather calls her out on it, leading to a memorable solo that ends on a characterizing note which blurs another line, metatext. As we discover, this is Valencia gliding along what's superficial so as to avoid facing a deeper pain. She wants to believe this situation is as easy as assuring people it'll be okay, but Rebecca tells her she can't promise anything, even to herself. Oh, it's that oldest crazy ex-girlfriend refrain about situations and how there's something or other. It'll come to me. But that refrain reiterates across Valencia's arc here, as we see her repeatedly put off dealing with issues in favor of, again, surface details. She takes on Rebecca as an assistant because it'll make her look fancy. She wants to organize classy events for classy people, and this is something Beth recognizes. Valencia feels a lot of shame for her past, which was so defined by Josh, and wants to remake her image by throwing herself in with the fancy and the elegant. But Beth encourages her to instead accept who she is, Josh's and all. When we go back and examine Season 1 Valencia, identify what she now looks back on with shame, what we find is kind of ironic. She was ashamed of being with Josh for so long, but she was probably with Josh because they were so celebrated. Being labeled a perfect couple via homecoming king and queen and persisting in that mentality through adulthood, that doesn't leave a lot of room for self-reflection. Maybe Valencia would have wanted something different, or even at that time, unimaginable. So we have to ask ourselves sometimes why things often are unimaginable.
Oh, just shut up. Okay.
Valencia is one of my favorite characters because not only is hers in part a redemption story, it features such a dramatic change, no matter what. And yet what always impresses me when looking back is how she is always so mean. But this meanness has been completely recontextualized.
Bitch, don't get in my way, bitch.
Her aggression and her vanity is something we enjoy now, but it was deployed specifically, and much differently in the first season. And when the creators were making the first season, I have to imagine they were holding their breaths the entire time because they had to lean so hard on an old rom-com trope. Like, remember when Valencia was the wrong woman, you know? A scene like this is framed from Josh's perspective because we're supposed to be sympathetic to the idea that Rebecca and Josh are the better match, and Valencia's feelings, well, they're incidental. It's not really in our television-watching lexicon to contain them. Valencia's to the day maintained this exact quality which 2 years ago was designed to frustrate us.
You ruin a shot again, and I will put you in ICU.
Like I was saying.
Ultimately, Valencia's acceptance of her past is an exercise in accepting imperfection. Nobody's story, whether romance or origin, is perfect or as planned, and the dance she and Josh do was actually perfect. I loved it. Valencia continues to discover new things about herself, and like Daryl in Season 1, needs to be adaptable in order to accept herself, and that's a trait that also faces outward. She continues to show up for Rebecca, and more personally for her, she reconciles with Josh. And Josh is another one who's gone through some change, though it's more like change is happening around him and he's trying to keep up. He begins the season by, as Hector perfectly summarizes, becoming a priest to avoid an awkward conversation. We've all been there. He's using the seminary to absolve his guilt, but when Rebecca inadvertently does so instead, he leaves in time to be outmaneuvered. It's a hectic time, and it demands growth. He wants to make things better in his usual style, washing away the guilt instantly, and he has to learn it's more complicated than that. Wow. It's like we, the audience, are watching stereotypes and preconceptions break down, and the character's specific preconceptions are breaking down too. In this case, that relationships are not always an opt-in, opt-out situation. Again, society is a series of inextricable relationships, and can be destitute when those aren't addressed, but when they are, it can be so much more. Though we knew at the time, his earliest enthusiasm here was a false happiness, to be improved upon by the end. But my god, this dance sequence is kind of unbelievable. I mean, he looks like he was animated by Pixar.
What did you have in mind?
Speculation abounded going into the premiere, and even afterward. Teased that Rebecca would try litigation, I was excited by the prospect of Josh hiring Audra Levine as a defense. Around that time, it just seemed like Season 3 could have taken so many different shapes, which is why those first 5 episodes were such a roller coaster. Twists and turns, like it was burning up all its story way too quickly. For the record, now in retrospect, I think, the season couldn't have been anything else. Funny how that works. But my big guess going in was that Season 3 would be taken up entirely by the revenge, which would put this moment at the finale. And yet by the finale, we've experienced so much that would have seemed unthinkable in this finale. In addition to Valencia and Josh finding some peace, Rebecca considers him one of the people she's wronged in her botched effort to atone for all her sins. She doesn't go to priest school, but she might as well have. Revenge stories, as discussed during 304, never work out, and if it's a woman's revenge story, the character's climactic death reinforces the normalcy of submissiveness. One of the common tropes of revenge movies I've seen, especially the Asian ones, is that revenge operates in a cycle of violence, and that cycle is going to be broken here. Rebecca takes her cues from those movies and seems more interested in the appearance of a woman scorned than figuring out whatever work that entails. I love this moment right here. It's a heads up, as we see Rebecca's ruin is fully leaning into crazy ex-girlfriend, accepting the label after so much rejecting it. Here she pours herself into a mold designed against her, and so it was doomed to fail. However, Rebecca's revenge was a project that galvanized female solidarity. I think that in the end, Rebecca actually gets her revenge, if we're supposing an equation between revenge and female empowerment, as she does. And part of the victory is the revision, breaking the cycle and taking violence out of it. Rebecca is haunted by her gender-swapped doppelganger, where 304 is reversed on her in the finale. Righting the core wrong in this world which created the label Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, that's not going to look like hiding in bushes and hanging teddy bears. It might instead look like building bridges, mending fences, other cliches that cheapen this time the virtue of human interconnectedness. And to emphasize, it won't look like Trent. Here's another character who begins as a running joke, and it was a good one, but they really lay on the accelerator here, theoretically disillusioning Rebecca shippers at the very least. His transformation from one-off plot device to embodiment of Rebecca's flaws is impressive by itself, like a hidden dagger up the sleeve, but so rich in the moment for making manifest the antagonism of self-loathing bubbling out of a well-remembered past. The creepiness is clear, but the line between these two characters is blurry. So it adds some spice to this question: does Trent deserve sympathy? Remember when Valencia was the bad guy, or when Nathaniel was the bad guy? There are no bad guys in West Covina, especially since the greatest villain of all is Rebecca. And the mission of the show is to contextualize a person who's been so vilified, who shouldered a lot of unfair blame, and shouldered through enough people to take some of that blame herself. With this mission of giving someone a fair shake, we say that the giving of fair shakes is good form. So what of Trent? Well, he didn't die, so he's clearly coming back, as his being and his returning are both touchstones of the show in equal measure, the camera panning to reveal Trent? One of the running jokes with Trent that hadn't significantly occurred to me before is his being a benevolent stalker, not aggressive or violent, and deferentially sexual. I think that's more out of concern for plot and tone, that Rebecca needs a reason to variously go along with Trent. But it's also consistent with the theme that problematic behavior often knows how to clean up well and dress up nice, like in turtlenecks. The crazy ex journey, whether girlfriend or fake boyfriend, is a quirky path that always seems to end in murder. Trent fulfills Jarl's prophecy about revenge movies, but the question is if Trent will learn anything from these same experiences that Rebecca's learned. So this question is still somewhat open. Trent is a work in progress, but I think his being uplifted into a fully realized character from a once-off joke is evidence enough that truly everyone in West Covina will deserve our sympathy. So here we are, back at Sugarface, which is Girl Squad Central ever since Boba went out of style. As an aside, I do always wonder when sets are either introduced or abandoned in shows, especially situational comedies, where the backgrounds are often so static as to simply be backgrounds, with no bearing on the situation, and that question inappropriately survives to even this situational comedy of what real-world cause led to Rebecca's old apartment replaced by the new one, or the exchange of boba for donuts. It's not even worth noting that it's always contextualized by the story, because that's obvious, but more so, there's utility beyond the immediate. Though donuts are unhealthier than boba for being unhealthier than just about anything, it's the stage for a fresh start, like fresh donuts. The Girl Squad is both itself and the publication of a broader idea that's always at work under the cheery West Covinian sun. It's about society, that the Girl Squad is our most immediate microcosm for the process of connection that we've been talking about. It had its roots in healing, coercive it may have been, and ends its origin story standing in solidarity against men who wronged women. It's about support.
It's web-based, it's streaming, it's a podcast. I don't know, but I'm very excited.
Sure. Well, thanks for listening.
Oh my God, anytime, babe. Okay.
And that's part of the note we end on. Early in the season finale, Daryl's family occupies this exam room, all standing by Heather. Everyone has a role, a reason, a history, but who has to duck out? In fact, who's been absent in the lives of everyone else this whole season? Rebecca is the final piece. Peaking with our postmodern baby MacGuffin, we've seen what's possible when people come together, and Rebecca's been their catalyst, as Nathaniel points out at the end. She challenges people to look inward, but this is most of her relative existence as being a cipher. Whether it's that Valencia's had to forgive Rebecca to the point of exhaustion, or that we no longer believe when Paula says, "I'm done with her," she does need to finally arrive in the world she's been architecting. Whatever that looks like, even if it looks exactly like the Rebecca shenanigans of old, I'm so excited. The completion of her journey means so much more than the hero reaching his destination, or saving the world, or thwarting the villain. She's carrying with her everyone who identifies with her on any level, regarding mental health, ethnicity, gender, label, and carrying us into a better world, sparked by the irresistible idea that we can always catalyze ours too. We can see how this community of people is developing because so much of their interaction is framed around projects. Rebecca's revenge, Rebecca's healing, Daryl's baby. Paula steps in to assist Daryl acquire an egg, Rebecca steps in to volunteer that egg, Heather steps in and volunteers to carry the baby, Valencia organizes the proceedings, Heather and Daryl, Nathaniel and White Josh. Hell, Valencia and Josh, relationships are re-examined or examined for the first time under this new auspice of the stuff that never happens on television. Sure, if Crazy Ex-Girlfriend actually went on for more than his 2 amazing seasons, Heather and Daryl may have had some storylines together, but I literally cannot even imagine what they would be. This to me is more than Endgame, which makes me all the more excited for what the endgame of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend as a singular narrative will be. But putting that aside, the Forge of West Covina as a utopia, asexual, friend, or otherwise, has been such a beautiful endgame to witness as it's unfolded across the season. So what about this one last crucial development, who's now positioned to make this world whole by returning to it whole? The ultimate revenge.
Yes, I decided to give you some of the anxiety pills that the doctor gave me for the high holidays. I just wanted to calm you down so we could talk, and I could convince you to go away somewhere.
I'm sorry, you wanted to commit me?
That is such a dramatic word.
You made me think that you loved me.
Something incredible happens after the 5th episode, which is that the show runs out of story. This is something that TV shows often prance into, with the elegance of a gazelle, catapult, but it's incredible rather than expected in this case. I mean, collapsing premises is practically etched into the DNA of this medium. A staggering majority of shows broadcast are cancelled before they reach what quickly becomes a fanciful notion, completion. Upon 306, I wondered what the rest of the season and the series would be like. The back half, considerably more mellow than the first, mostly focuses on Rebecca and Nathaniel, which is a significant part of the journey I couldn't predict coming off season 2. We can be cynical about it, and by we, I mean I, and say this is the inevitability of male and female leads. But there I go again, underestimating the show on the basis of its admittedly wobbly medium. Rebecca's back and forth with Nathaniel here not only reflects the teasing of the first half, it revises it. And it's not so much about Nathaniel any more than being a crazy ex-girlfriend was about Josh. It's the question, as hashed out in Dr. Akopian's office, of whether or not Rebecca can believe she deserves love.
What do you want?
I want your hard, throbbing ruthlessness, and I want it bad.
Who talks like that?
I hadn't necessarily been too intrigued or engaged by the Rebecca-Nathaniel courtship as it played out in Season 3, but it's just because Nathaniel has to be an almost blank, ideal candidate. In order for Rebecca to develop her aptitude for a relationship with anyone, Nathaniel has to be that anyone, lest we add too many variables to this scientific experiment. However, with the very last number of the season, we revisit his moral compass, and I can see him as a fundamentally broken person. I fell for it again. A character with a perfect shell is reintroduced with a perfect shell, but of course there's something deeper going on. And of course, when there's broken people on television, you imagine that relationships are part of healing that.
We got dumped. Did. Oh.
Nathaniel, if we remember, established his morality early on, a kind of ruthless impartiality, especially in business, as was the case with his budget deadline. Though he fires George for the purpose of intimidation, these new employees are just names on a spreadsheet. So when Rebecca and Paula bring in enough new business to satisfy the budget, nobody needs to get fired. As is the essence of capitalism, what's lost here is the human element, and so the mechanical distance of names on a spreadsheet is exactly why Nathaniel can be so remorseless in firing George. Like Valencia, this is the essence that doesn't change, no matter how soft he's gotten. In fact, the essence and the softness are related. We've been exploring Nathaniel's relationships with his father and his mother. We see his body-related insecurities flare up. We witness his everyday life, especially his friendship with White Josh, which was a real duh moment for me. With all of it, we see the origin of his underlying issues, and then how they impact his adult life. We add another dimension with this scene, his response to those issues. At constant odds with them, he is the inescapable product of his upbringing, and as a result, the bad things he does were practically predetermined. He is just the instrument, and that amorality, as Rebecca identifies it, is wholly consistent with his mechanical distance. Here, it's a distance from consequence. It's ironic because whenever he talks about Rebecca, he admires, or recoils at, how she's changed him. Clearly he can transform, and appreciates that he has. So the question that's prompted by describing the cycle of toxicity as cosmic and ancient is, will they be the ones to break that cycle? They're evidently subconsciously aware of it, and in the end, Rebecca decides to give it a shot. Boy, does she.
So I plead responsible. I mean, guilty.
Now, sometimes you have a situation where the resolution to a story satisfies the theme better than it does the continuity of the characters or the world. A debatable example is Lieutenant Daniels at the end of The Wire, who turns down a major promotion because he'd owe someone for it and doesn't want to be in anyone's pocket. Given the themes of battling a dishonorable system, this is the right storytelling move. But if you existed in-universe next to Daniels, you might ask why he doesn't take the job anyway, because surely someone worse will take it instead. His rejection is where the expression of the point lives. And here, Rebecca decides to finally take responsibility for everything she's done that nobody asked for, but did she have to do it while on trial for murder? And let's pause there too, just for a moment. Even on certain prestige HBO programming, the people we like aren't held accountable for their actions like this. Among the roles we've seen occupied by engaging characters, one role that hasn't been filled out is the police. Except they have, as kind of a feint. The officer in the first season could be overcome with some quick thinking, and if you start talking like an anime character.
But I understand that this is not really worth your time. And the reason for that I will go into right now.
Not very threatening, and so an instance like this, standing in contrast, and along with the occasional reminder of Rebecca's history with law enforcement, has this discomforting quality which pokes reality into our escapist fantasy land. We've seen Rebecca and Paula trespass and hack and surveil, and we've assumed nothing will come of that. In the show that leaves absolutely no accountability stone unturned, this will be part of the final test. The world that Rebecca helps create for her community still needs her, in as many ways as she exists. Rebecca as friend, Rebecca as catalyst for change, Rebecca as feminist icon, and finally Rebecca as someone who's done that discomforting work of having fully accepted herself. So yes, thematically Rebecca needed to take responsibility at that exact moment, and the stakes being so high tells us she's committing to it. We have the two sides set. Nathaniel supplies her a fancy Los Angeles criminal defense if she admits to being insane, using her history and her diagnosis as an out, or she accepts all of it and faces the legal consequence. What cinches it is Paula's arrival in the courthouse. Just seeing her means a lot for Rebecca, so let's try to unpack what's going through her mind in this moment. At this point, it's hard to say that their last fight was the most catastrophic relative to all the others, so the point is that there's a cumulative effect. What's so heartbreaking is Paula saying she doesn't believe Rebecca can change, and is effective because there's truth to it. Like in some revenge movies, or even gangster movies, events set in motion by the cycle have a habit of coming back, and that's how you get trapped. In this case, it's not Rebecca's fault that Trent is back, but at the same time, it is. At the end of the season, Rebecca finds herself where Josh was at the beginning, looking for the quick fix to avoid an awkward confrontation. She writes out a list of sins and hands them to each person she's wronged, and this demonstration of mechanical distance, names on a spreadsheet, is our setup. Perhaps in response to Rebecca's claim that Paula's life apart from her is empty, she spent the season filling it out, building and renewing trust with all the people in her life. She confessed her stalker sins to Valencia, truly welcomed Scott back into her life, patched things over with Sunil, but then she's faced with Rebecca, who she can't trust. Rebecca's like a shark, ever circling, and it's meaningful because we've been setting the metrics throughout for what Paula expects from a relationship, and also what she deserves for being long-suffering, and because she works at it.
I love you, and Rebecca is your friend, and she loves you. And female friendships are very strange, and stop complaining.
And so what Rebecca sees in this moment is the person she's most wronged over the last 3 seasons. There's a reason beyond the abstractions of love and family that can be clouded by social messages and criminal upbringings. It's the human consequence of Paula being hurt, and that becomes a greater consequence than any the judge can serve up. The iconic blue dress is scarier than the orange jumpsuit. It's what has Paula lying in bed, reminiscing when Rebecca leaves her time and again. Crazy Ex-Girlfriend begins on the note of the label, something manufactured at the farthest point from human contact, and now promises to bridge the final gaps between people. The final bridges. There is no goddamn way to speak with a utopian inflection and not sound like a total dork. Now, it's hard to reduce the relationship down to Rebecca eternally disappointing Paula, because as has been widely noted, there's toxicity on both sides. Overall, there's multidimensionality between the two, and so my biggest question right now for Season 4 is about the nature of Rebecca and Paula's relationship. Another one of the impressive mechanisms of the show is to introduce something compelling, like our devious duo, then show why he's not 100% great, and then, consistent with other areas like Heather's observational comedy or Valencia's villainy, provide a meaningful answer. And each step of that process feels like the main event, rather than a layer building to the next. It's also the rare show that's intricate in its construction, but doesn't show you its clockwork. Season 3 ends incredibly bittersweetly, and Rebecca's trembling, tired, and hopeful eyes are the image which now, to me, defines it in retrospect. It's so bold to have staged this image, so ambitious to have laid the groundwork to optimally reach it, leaving me with that confounding feeling I get so rarely from media that I don't know exactly how to feel, but that's okay. I can just leave it. Let it be, because its being is something wonderful. Though I didn't realize it, Season 3 has been this battle between light and dark as they cloud or blind Rebecca along her journey. There's hope throughout, glimpses of redemption between what was previously intermittent darkness, but which now eclipses, holding there like the eyes of creepy children in old paintings. In my mind, after Season 2, I had the rest of the series mapped out. As mentioned earlier, I thought Season 3 would end on this note, the character's lowest point, and then Season 4 would be about her getting help, and they could satisfactorily call it a show. The new dimension carved out by the back half of the third season, where Rebecca is found to be inextricable from her community, and this community posits the intersections of introspection and solidarity, of individuality and relationships, it's just honestly so exciting. It's so much more than what I predicted, and even its setup has taught me so much via narrative harmony from creators with invaluable perspectives and astonishing talent. I don't know if we'll see the final payoff, the final bridges, but if I'm left to imagine for the time being, it'll be that same underestimation. That's partly my fault, but it's also the show's for being just so goddamn good.
Is BPD easy to fix? Is BPD genetic? Did I get the BPD from my mother? I got it from my mother, right? Again, just like rapid fire, just like answer, don't think about it.
Okay, I never fall for rapid fire.